Hey, we're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at how Ceti, Planetary Crisis. I did a video a while back on a prototype of this when the Kickstarter was still going on and whatnot. And finally got the final version here. And actually a little bit late in getting this video out. It's been a hectic couple months here. So going to get right in and take a look. It's a very interesting 4X game. A lot of stuff in this box. Supports up to 5 players, technically 6. There's 6 different races in there, so it gives you a little variety. There's also a single player mode with AI to play the NPCs for you. And there's the living starship. I don't know if you can even see it on there. It's black on black, but it's a NPC ship that goes around and causes havoc. So we'll get right in and take a look. So I've done a little bit of reorganizing inside the box. Once you punch out everything, it's really hard to get everything back in there. So I've done my best to get everything back in the box in a usable fashion. Some people are probably going to ditch the insert that comes with here and make their own, but it is useful. I mean, it works well the way it is. It's just not as organized as some people would like. I would like to make some trays for the actual different races so you can hand each player a tray and be done with it. Right now they're in separate little bags for each, but we'll get to those in a minute. First thing we have is our rule book, and there's been a lot of talk on the forums and things over the rule book, and I'm going to take partial blame because I did a lot of proofreading and things on stuff, and having played previous versions, having already had knowledge of things, some stuff I think did get overlooked or kind of glossed over in the book where it should have been explained in more detail or put together. One of the things is like these abilities here. Some of the various items in the game's commodities have special abilities, and they're spread throughout the book instead of on a nice little chart all together. Things like that that we just kind of took for granted we already knew about, and should have been condensed to make it easier for new players. And other than that, though, I mean, it's not a bad book. It just takes a couple reads through before you're going to get everything. There's lots of examples and whatnot, which I find is one of the key things in a rule book, having picture examples, because text doesn't always convey everything. And then there's like this cheat sheet on the back, which doesn't have a, as I said, like the commodity listings. There's some other things they could have put on here to make that more useful. It's basically just telling you what the symbols are and things, so. Overall, though, it's definitely not the worst book I've seen. And it gets the job done, especially after you play it a few times, or if you can have somebody teach you the game and then use the book just for reference. It works great for that. Skip that real quick. Second one we're going to go on to is the faction book. This is actually kind of a really neat thing they included in here. And it has all the different races that are in the game. And this is another one. The commodities list is actually in this book, not in the rule book. Somebody mentioned that too. But each of the pages is a 2-page spread, basically, on a specific race. Talks about their planet, their society, and things. A little backstory and fluff on each of them. Neat little thing, and it gives you a lot of backstory to what's going on in the system. And then this next book is actually part of an expansion that was I think it was a Kickstarter exclusive. If not, I mean, they may be selling it separate. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's for the living starship. We'll go over that in a separate segment. So, in here, we have our Ceti exchange. These were a little bit thinner than I was kind of hoping, but they still seem to be pretty durable. I've played it a bunch of times now, and I don't see any visual scratches or anything on there, so they're holding up pretty well. And you're going to have little tokens that go on these that move up and down based on the supply and demand of various commodities throughout the game. These are going to change every Cetian cycle, they call it. It's basically every 4 rounds. And prices will go up and down. Up here you keep track of your turn counter. The game will go to 10 turns, or you can have an optional 11th and 12th turn on there. And then up here is where the extra knowledge tokens go. And then off to either side you have a spot here for the crisis deck, and over here for your specialist deck. We'll get to those when we get to the cards. And an interesting note on these is that they're double-sided. Not sure why. Everything's the same on both sides. Just seems like extra ink. Could have been black on the back or whatever, but if you do end up getting scratches or whatnot on there, you can always flip them over. Next thing we have is the Galactic Depot. And these are going to be where your extra tokens are laid out, and your parts to your ship that you can buy. Whenever you do the upgrade, you can go through here and pick out the various systems you want to upgrade. And there's tokens for them all with different values on them, different names. So not much to that one. Next we have our player boards. Now each one of these, I didn't have these in my prototype, so these are kind of new to me. I had to print out my own little ones, but these are really cool. Every one of them, these are actually in a slightly different order. A lot of people don't notice that off the top. They also have different values up here. Like in this case, we have the Xenon Collective has a bonus to propulsion, and there you have the Dominion and Choir. I can never say that one. And they have the bonus to shields and cargo. So the all these icons are in slightly different orders as well, which comes into play when you're using the AI, because of the ones before this little line here are part 1. These aren't used anymore, I don't think, and these are 2, and depending on which you do more of during your turn, it triggers what the AI is going to do. So there's a lot of information on these. Mostly you're going to be using this center section is where you place your tokens. You get 4 action tokens a turn that you can use. Underneath these tells you if you're going to gain or lose power or other items. And then down here, can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but down here you're going to have a token in the middle here. As you build orbitals and things or upgrade your ship, it's going to move this back and forth. It makes recruiting members to your team and things cheaper or more expensive, because it's going to be easier to get members to join a ship that's heavily modified, whereas if you're spending a lot of resources, it's a little more expensive because nobody wants to join you because you're spending a lot of money. So that varies on there. Down here's your cargo bay. This takes a little getting used to. Unlike other games where you have a set amount and you just put things on a pile, these your tokens will actually go on here, and you can have, instead of having 4 of the same commodity, you'll have 1 token on here, and as you pick up more, you slide it over, so you represent if you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of each item. It's a strange thing, but it works. Down here you're going to put your captain card based on the captain you choose for your ship. And on this side we have our Tau. This is basically your currency in the game. And it has a scale 0 to 9. And then there's a second thing, you put a little icon on here to represent 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. On the opposite side we have our energy bar. And again, this is 0 to 9 scale with the 10, 20, 30, 40 marker. And energy you're going to expend to do various actions. And each one of these, as I said, is slightly unique to the race. You can see there the differences in the order of things, the differences in the base values of your systems for your ship. And on the back of each of these is the same page that's in the Fluff Lore book that talks about the different races. So you can flip through and decide which race you want to play. The book's a nice feature because as you're playing the game, these are going to be face down on the table. You're not going to be able to pick it up to look at it without moving all your markers all over. So it's nice to have that book as well. So my box is pretty sorted out from from what I could do with the supplies I had, they did give you a ton of these baggies included in the game, so you can separate everything out yourself. So I pulled a couple extra things out of there that I had that weren't supposed to be in there. So if you see something missing that was there earlier in the video, that would be why. But I wanted to leave just the stuff that actually comes with the set in here. So we have our damage crystals. As your systems are going to get damaged on your ship, you're going to use these to represent that. And they go on the various systems. So on your ship here, as you take damage, you're going to put them on there. If you get a number equal to the number of little boxes on there on the system, it's destroyed and can't be used until it's repaired. As I said before, you can buy upgrades to your ship that'll make these more powerful systems so they can take a little bit more damage before they go down. You also get a small bag of green gems. These ones are used for virus counters. There's only a handful in here. Not sure if they didn't expect them to get overly saturated in the game, but I've actually picked up some extras for myself because you do end up using more than just the 4 as viruses spread. Next we have our really cool custom dice for this game. They are kind of like these weird alien, remind me of circuit board symbols. It was pointed out to me at one point that they are not actual normal D6s. As you can see there, you can see the 1 and the 6. They should be on opposite sides. Not that it really matters for a game, but if you're picky about that sort of thing, they are cool dice though, and I actually have an extra set from before, so we have a ton of them that we use, so you don't have to pass them around the table during the game. Next we have a bag of these tokens. Basically one for each of the races. I'll dump one of these out later and show you everything that's inside, but you have these little orbital tokens here which represent your space stations, and the player tokens here which look like a little fighter jet. These are for the regular version of the game. I have the deluxe version which comes with all the models you can see down there, so we don't really use them, but they're in there just because. Then there's a couple other odds and ends, but there's a bag of these for each of the factions. They match the colors. Like I said, we'll get into them in more detail in a minute. And there's 6 of them, one for each of the colored factions. And we have our bag of knowledge, I believe it's called. Bag of enlightenment, that's what it was. And the your cube tokens will go in here, and at the beginning of each of the Ceti cycles you're going to draw a cube out of here, and the color that comes up is the planet that gets the crisis for that turn. So your objective is to get your tokens out of here and onto the field so that you have less chance of one happening on your homeworld. And then now you can see a little bit more of the insert, the really cool tray for the models, which I'm going to get out next here. And there's tons more tokens underneath there. This tray is really cool. The ships are actually a little bit smaller than I thought they were going to be, looking at pictures and things online. I saw the prototype, so I wasn't that surprised when I got the final version, but I can see where somebody might be. And hard to get a close-up of them on the in the tray here, but there's your various different player ships along the bottom there. And then all of the different orbitals. There's 4 for each of the factions. And then this little hole here, we have our living starship. Again, use one of the add-ons. I might do a separate video just for the living starship, just to go over that stuff, since it is an extra add-on for the game. Next we have our large tiles here. Starting on the top with Tau Ceti itself, the star. And then, of course, these are all mixed in still, but the game board is always going to start with these in play. You're going to start with the sun in the middle of the table, and then these are going to get shuffled up, and each player is going to randomly put one down. And they include the starting planets for all of the major races, as well as some asteroid fields and some open space. So these are going to change the layout of the map slightly each time you play. But the core of the game is always going to be those tiles. Next we have our outer limit tiles. And these are smaller map tiles which can be explored throughout the course of the game that have various effects. Lots of cosmic rays, asteroids, there's a couple wormholes in there, and so on. And because these are different shape than the standard ones, when they interlock, there are going to be gaps, which most games use one style of tile or the other, and not both. But since this game uses both, so we have these dark matter tiles, which come in 1s, 2s, and 3s, and they're used to fill in those little gaps in between to make two sectors adjacent to each other, so that you can fly between them without having to go around. Quick example here. I'm going to get one out. Let's see there, to go from Altari over to the Zuron asteroid, you would have to fly over through the sun and mat, which you can't do. So we put one of these here, and now these two are adjacent, and you can fly in between them. They're interesting. They're a little fiddly on the side, but once you get the hang of using them, they are interesting. Little way to get around having the two different size tiles. So next under here we have a bag. This has all of our... I've sorted these out myself to make it easier for us to set up. This is everything that goes on the Ceti exchange. The white tiles are used to keep track of the market. The black ones are used for shields for combat. And there's a turn marker in there, as well as the 5 knowledge tokens that you start. Sorry, 6 knowledge tokens that start on the exchange. Next we have our commodity tiles. These are used to keep track of the market values of what's in demand on each planet, as well as what you have in your cargo. There's, I believe, 5 or 6 of each. I think there's 5 of each of 6 different commodities in there. Then we have our galactic victory point markers. These come in 1s, 3s, and I think there's a 5. I can't remember now. I know there's 1s and 3s in there. A couple negative ones as well. Depending on what you're scoring throughout the game, different things you do will get you these. They just add on to your points at the end of the game. They're kind of reminder tokens so you can keep track. We have our whole stack of crisis tokens here. These are used whenever a crisis comes into play. You're going to put these on the various planets that are affected. On the reverse side of them is the commodities that are affected by that specific crisis. Then we have our knowledge tokens here. These are going to be face down. You can see they have the rings on the back on all the different points on the various tiles. Wherever you see one of these circles, you're going to put one of these face down. Once you've explored that icon, you flip this over. You see the knowledge token that it refers to. You're going to draw a knowledge card, which we'll get to in a minute, and complete the task. If you complete the task, you successfully explore that point. If not, it goes back down. And depending on how you roll, you may get to take those knowledge tokens as well, which can be used to help resolve crisis in the future. There's also some like this one right here that has a 2 on it. That's a marauder fleet. If you come across those, you'll have to combat those. And then there's a set of red ringed ones which go with the Altari sector, and they have their own knowledge deck that goes with them. And then lastly, for tokens, we have our ship upgrade tokens. And all of them have various strengths as well as names. You can see here it's an antimatter beam. It's a strength 4. Radiation deflector is a 2. The value up here is how many dice you're going to get to use when rolling that system. It's also how much damage it can take before it's disabled. All of them have various names. There's a neutron shield, a xanatronic missile, ionic thrusters, sorry. And the only ones that don't have names are the cargo bays, which simply increase your amount of cargo capacity. But there's 2 of every system in there. If you really want to be a stressful game, you can limit them down to 1 of each system. Makes first come, first serve really bad. We've tried that in a couple lower player count games. Kind of fun. That's it for the tokens. Now we're on to cards. The card slots in here fit the decks perfectly when they're non-sleeved. Once you sleeve them, I've come to find that if you put the cards across here, vertical like they are, standing up, you have just enough room down here. I have not sleeved my smaller cards though, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I go to sleeve those. I might put some in here. And of course some of these cards are optional. You have your, in here you might not have, all these signal check cards from the living starship. So those might not even be included in your set, so you might not have that extra cards to store. These ones here for the solo variants give you AI for each of the factions. So if you aren't using any of the factions, you line up the factions that you want to use as an NPC, and these are what they're going to do based on what you've done during your turn. And then there's also a thing that explains how AI battles work and how they'll take their turns. Played a couple games using these. They seem overly aggressive. Maybe it was just the, I can't remember who I used. It might have been the Zorkons. And they seemed really overly aggressive. Like, not all of them are, so I think it was just them. Happened to be what I used that one game. You can see the all the attack icons in there. So I have to play a few more games with the solos to really know how well it works, but it functions enough where they can play the game. And it's interesting to have one of these as a extra player, even if you're playing like 2 or 3 players, to throw one of these in just to have that extra player in there that's kind of unpredictable. So one of the cool features of the game is that you can choose a captain for your ship. Each of the races has 3 captains to choose from. Each captain has special abilities as well as racial abilities that apply to all of them. In this case, you can see here, all 3 of these have the same logistics as their primary, and their secondaries change depending on who you have. You have science, diplomacy, and military there. They also have different abilities down here. And some of them will also have different amounts of starting energy and currency. All these seem to have the same here. And they also have these little icons in the corner which tell you bonus victory points at the end of the game. You get it for having the one with the dot over its head as opposed to the one that doesn't have the dot on it. Again, there's 3 of those for each race that make the game different each time you play. Even if you're using the same race, you can choose a different one of these. It makes things feel completely different. Next ones we have are the exotic technology cards. If you completely upgrade your ship to its maximum capability, you're going to get one of these for free. They are first come, first serve. There's only 1 of each. And they are some pretty powerful tech. These are going to go into your lab slot on your ship. And there's a cloaking device, cybertechnics, reflection field, starlifter, warp drive, and antimatter beam. All have their bonuses, so you really have to decide what one fits in best with your playstyle. cool things though. One of the really neat features of the game is the difficulty adjustments that you can make. We have these advanced rules cards. They're gone throughout the rule book. They're labeled. These are just basically a reminder card so that you can put these on the table to remind everyone that these advanced rules are in play. The game comes with 6 of them here, and they all add varying difficulties to specific things in the game. This one, for instance, if you have a crisis on your home world, you lose one of your action markers and can't get it back until the next action phase, which means basically on the turn that a crisis affects your home world, you're going to lose one of your 4 actions, which is pretty bad. There's the one about the virus crystals where they can spread and so on. Neat little thing to have to adjust the difficulty if you find the game too easy, or after multiple plays you just want some more variety or change things up a little bit. Those will help you. Next we have our diplomacy cards, and oddly enough they rate the game as 1 to 5 players, and they mention that one of the victory conditions can't even be met if you play with all 6, but they did give you 6 of the diplomacy cards, so they did know that somebody out there is going to be crazy enough to play the game 6 player. You get a diplomacy card whenever you help resolve a crisis on a opponent's planet, and it gives you some cool bonuses. If you attack another player during the game, you will lose your diplomacy card and cannot get another one back. Next we have cabinet members. These were actually added to the game later on, and I've only played a couple games with them. We found it easier to teach the game without them. And basically each player, depending on how many you have, has a different role, and these are going to rotate throughout the game, but at the start you have special abilities and things that you get based on your current role. One is also the first player marker, which has this, if I can get it out, this little standee to stand it up on the table so you can see. We don't actually use that because I'm afraid they're going to chew up the edge of the cards, but it's easy enough just to leave these face up next to your player board. The options there though if you want them. They do again add a little bit more depth, a little bit more replayability to the game because you do get cool special abilities from them. But again, it's one of those neat things that's optional, so you don't have to use, kind of like the advanced rules. Next we have our interplanetary missions, and there is a lot of those. And most of these involve a simple pickup and delivery. I gotta say, a lot of people compare at least some aspects of this game to Xia, and I will say the interplanetary missions in this, I think, are better in this game than in Xia, for the simple fact that all of the home worlds are in play from the very beginning of the game. So whenever you pick one of these missions up, this location and this location are already going to be in play, guaranteed. So you don't have to sit on missions that you can't use and wait for them to become available. They're all already there. Lots of transport missions. There's a few that have you go out to a specific location and either drop something off, or there's one where you're testing specific weapons, and depending on the results that you roll, you get various results, various extras. Again, you're rolling to get your reward. Xia had that a lot, which people didn't like, so you have to keep that aspect in mind. Tons of small cards in this game that I don't have sleeves for yet. So here we have our exploration token, or exploration cards, and these are broken up. There's a set specifically for the Altari system, but those go specifically to that system. For the rest of them, there's this deck here. Now you can separate these into specific decks by the types, or what we do is just keep them in one pile, and as you do an exploration you flip those tokens over, and the symbol that comes up on there, you're going to draw the first card with that matching symbol. So you flip through, of course that one was right on top, but you would flip through until you found one with the symbol, flip that card over, and then resolve that card in order to explore. Each one has a little bit of fluff text up here at the top telling you what you're doing, and then the actual description down here, and then the results on the bottom. In this case, your you're collecting a fragment of an asteroid and it ends up growing spores. So you're going to use your science skill based on what you have. That's going to tell you how many dice to roll. And you're going to get, on a 0 to 8, you're going to get a damage to your cargo. On a 9 or more, you're going to get 3 tau. And then this symbol here is basically the symbol of Tau Ceti Authority. If you roll a 5 or a 6 on any of your dice, you're going to get that one. So if you're using your comparative advantage or whatever it is, and you got your 4 dice you're rolling, if any of those dice are 5 or 6s, you're going to get that knowledge token. But the total still has to be, you know, 0 to 8, you're going to get the damage, 9 plus, you're going to get the money. And there's a decent variety of these, and they get cycled throughout the course of the game. And the final ones of the small cards are the objectives. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to get 2 of these. They're basically secret goals that you need to accomplish to get bonus points at the end of the game. And the only real drawback that we found to these is that a lot of them, see there, some like this are pretty cool, they're unique. You get 3 victory points if you have 15 extra energy at the end of the game. It's these ones that require you to have specific commodities. You need to have these 3 commodities, 4 of each of them, which already is a lot. People are going to see that you're stockpiling them. They know what you got, so you got to wait till the final turns to even try to get them. But there's a lot of them. And granted, every one of them has slightly different requirements. As you can see there, they all have different, at least one thing different in them. But there are a ton of those that are so similar that they're just not that interesting. A lot of the other ones here, though, are cool. This one, you have to have 20 or more tau, as I drop it. Like this one, you have to have 20 or more tau at the end to get a bonus 3 points. Lots of cool ones like that, but there's just so many of the collect multiple units of cargo. There's a ridiculous one that you have to have 2 of every commodity. And so on. So, way too many of the collect 3 item ones. Half the time we find these get ignored. Because by the time you start gathering them, people know what you're after. And they know what you're going for. Defeats the purpose of them being secret, really. So last thing we have in the box here is all these cards. There are a ton of them. So there's 2 decks of cards here, and they have the exact same backs on them, which is extremely confusing and difficult when first learning the game. It makes sense later on because you're going to have these in your hand, and that way nobody can tell how many of each card you have. But while you're first sorting things out and whatnot, it does make things a bit confusing. Now the smaller deck of them is our Crisis deck. I'm sorry they're sleeved. I wasn't about to unsleeve the whole thing just to do the video, but we have been playing. And these various crises are going to come up and affect planets throughout the course of the game. They have a thing up here describing what's going on. And down here is the effect. And once there's a crisis in play, of course, you put one of the crisis tokens on a planet. It also affects the market of various items, whatever's on the reverse side of the crisis token. And every turn, one of these is going to be drawn and put into a hand. And one of the other deck here, which are our specialists. This deck's actually super thick because I have all my advanced specialists in here too. I believe those were Kickstarter exclusives. I did not pull them out of here. I'm not sure if the advanced guys are in the final version of the game or not. In the retail version. So that one, forgive me if I'm wrong on that. Someone will correct me in the comments. But the advanced specialists stay in play. The regular specialists are one use. And as I said, there's a ton of them there. But each turn you're going to put one crisis and one of these into play, and then players can grab ones out of their hands to add in as well. And the up here is the type of crisis they can prevent, and then they can also be used to resolve specific crises if you combine them with a knowledge token of the proper type. And then some of these, like these are the advanced guys here. have actions on them that can be used during your turn. They play a big part of the game. They're not nearly as complicated as they sound. You're basically using your specialists to resolve crises and help things along. You're putting some of those in at the beginning of each turn in exchange for energy. Every card you put into the pile gains you energy. However, you eventually will have to put things like crisis into the pile just because you're going to need the energy. When you put a crisis in there, depending on how many crises are in the hand when it's done, so we'll just grab a couple here. We're going to look at these, and of course they're all different. If one of these two specialists had been able to prevent one of these, they would cancel each other out and go away. Since they didn't, we'll take these. Whichever one has the highest number, in this case the 4 here, you're going to get the polar reversal, and this is the crisis that's going to go into play. If at any point during the game a crisis ends up on every one of the homeworlds, all the players lose. So you have to keep that in mind. While it is more of a versus game, a lot of people say it's co-op. I don't really... It's co-op to an extent. It's all in how you want to play. But that's one thing you have to look out for. You may not want to help people, but you may have to prevent the end of the game. You also get these cool reference cards for each of our players. And on one side they talk about victory conditions and how you earn galactic points. The other side is your player resources, how to do various things, acquiring energy or tau. Okay, so really roughly I set this up here with only one player just to give an example. And show you some of the things you can do. So on your turn, you're going to have four action tokens. You can only use one of these each time, and then it switches to the next player. And you have your player board here with a list of all your actions you can do across there. I know you can't read them from there, but just for the sake of an example here, we're going to use our first one to move. Moving costs 1 energy, so we're going to move our energy marker down by 1. We're going to move our ship up to our propulsion, which on this is only a 1. We're going to move 1 system. Then it's going to go on to the next player, come around, comes back to us. We can take our second action. We're going to explore because we have a bunch of exploration tokens here in this system that we're in. So we'll drop one on explore. We get to pick one of these tokens that we want to flip over. So we're going to take the one that's right in front of us here. And we get a chemical. So we're going to go over to our knowledge deck over here. And we're going to find the first chemical card. Just right there. And then we're going to resolve what happens on here. So in this case, we've got trace chemicals reside on several asteroids, leading us to an investigation to determine if this is a disabled warp ring. Use our logistics skill to reassemble the warp ring for future study. And then we need, on a 0 to 8, it's going to cost us 2 energy. On a 9, we're going to gain 2 energy. And if we get the Ceti thing there, we're going to get a, which is a 5 or a 6, we're going to gain a knowledge token. So we look at our character here. And he's good with industry and military, which means that he does not get a bonus to logistics here. So on all your stats you don't have any bonus on, you're going to roll 2. In that case, our military was a 3, so we would get 3, and our industry was a 4, we would get 4 dice. So we're going to get 2 dice. We want to get an 8 or higher, and or a 9 or higher, sorry. And at least one of these we want a 5 or a 6. Which we did. We got a 6. So far away you can't see. We rolled a 6 and a 4. 6 means we got the knowledge token, so we get to take that and keep that for ourselves. And we rolled a 10, which is 9 or higher, so we're going to gain 2 energy, so we actually gain that back up. Now we're at 11. This card will go to the bottom of the knowledge deck. And then we can take our claim marker, which is the flag, throw a claim on that other exploration so that somebody can't come in and snatch this away from us now that we've got it half done. Now we're going to go around to everybody else's turn again. Comes back to us. We're still sitting there. We're going to do exploration again to try to get that other route that we have our claim token on. We flip that over and we get a cosmic. So we're going to take our first cosmic knowledge card. Just there. I know I'm doing stuff off camera, sorry. And this one says, we witness a few unmarked ships attempting to blow up a large asteroid, which could send fragments towards Atlas. Use our diplomacy skill to relay our concerns to the TCA, which is the Ceti Authority. On a 0 to 8, we lose 2 energy. On a 9+, we're going to gain a 3 tau, and on a success, we're going to gain the knowledge token. Again, diplomacy is not one of our strong suits with this character, so we only got 2 dice. 2 double 5s. I know they're really hard to see from that range, but I don't want to move the camera every time I do something. And this is just a quick demonstration. So anyway, we got 2 5s, which means we did get the success, which is a 5 or a 6 on a die, so we're going to get that token. We also got 9 or higher, so we're going to get 3 tau. We move our marker up 3. And we also succeeded. Now that we've explored both points of that, we're going to take one of our colored tokens, if I can get one here, out of the bag. And that's going to go on that point. And the card that we used goes to the bottom of the deck. And the turn progresses to the next player. So it comes back around to us. We've got 1 action left, and we're going to do a build just to build an orbital. So put it on our build. It is -1 to this, so this is going to slide 1 to our left, and then we're going to pay 2 times, which is right here. There's a little reminder. Again, it's so far away you can't see, but when you get your own stuff, you'll be able to see there. We're going to pay 2 times the amount, which is 2, so it's going to cost us 4 tau. Move our slider down 4. We take one of our orbitals from orbit around our planet and put it on that location. We take our cube and it goes on our home planet. Now, because we have the cube on our home planet, we're going to get extra resources every turn, which is very nice. And we also have the orbital in play, which can help us defend this system. If we lose the orbital, we lose the cube, goes back to the bag, and we have to start that process over. So it does make it a target, so you want to defend your orbitals once you've got them built. But that's pretty much how a turn goes. Now that all 4 have done, I skipped the enlightenment phase at the beginning just because this is an example. At the beginning of each turn, you're going to go through your bag. So technically this is turn 2. We would have already done this once. But now we move on to turn 2. You're going to shuffle up the bag here. It's got all the tokens in it. You're going to pull out one of the cubes at random, which I can't get one because my fingers are huge and the bag's small. And we got our own color cube. Now what happens in that case, the cube is going to go back in the bag. But it means if a crisis takes place, it's going to be on our planet. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw the top crisis. Put it here. We're going to draw the top specialist and put it here. Now we have our hand of cards that we started with. Any player at the table can now add to this pile. They know it's going to take place on my home world if something happens. You can add in a specialist to try to counter whatever that might be, or you can add in another crisis to make it worse. In this situation, we're just going to throw in a card here. We're going to throw in a specialist. And because we put the specialist in, we're going to move our marker up by 3 energy. This is how you regenerate energy. You can do this at any time during the enlightenment phase. You get 3 for each card you put in. So if we wanted to put a second card in there, we could, and we can gain an extra 3 energy, and so on. After this is all done, everybody's done putting cards in, you're going to reveal these. If this here is our crisis. If any of these cards have that symbol, which none of them do, they could cancel that crisis. Because none of them did, and there were no extra crises in there either, if there was an extra crisis, say both of these were in, we would look at these numbers in the top corner here, and the lowest one would get discarded. So we're going to take this one, which wasn't actually in there, so we're going to go with this one here, which is a light aberrations. It's an atmospheric crisis. A little fluff here telling you what's going on. And our effect is that you return all atmospheric knowledge tokens to the depot, which sucks. If we had a knowledge token down here we could use on our turn with the correct specialist to resolve this, and this is going to make us get rid of it, which we don't have one of those anyway. But then on top of that, to represent this crisis, we're going to take the top token of the atmospheric crisis, and this is going to go on our home planet. And before we do that, we're going to look at the bottom here and see that it's going to affect military, which is our strength, and that's going to move the cost of military goods up 1 extra notch, and that stays in play. And then you would go on with the normal reshuffling of the commodities from the planets are going to go back into the pile. You're going to shuffle out new ones, and then the marketplace is going to adjust accordingly. That's a quick look at a Ceti cycle with a single player, obviously. Each player is going to go through those same steps that I just did. That's 1 turn. You're going to do that 10 times throughout the course of the game. And that's pretty much the quick look at the basics. I skipped a lot of the other options you can do, like upgrading your ship, interplanetary missions. There's a thing to repair, refuel, and so on. But gives you a quick look at how the turn progresses. And that's a quick look at everything that comes in the box. There's a ton of stuff here. The game is quite complicated, and some people might get frustrated by that. It is not something you're going to pick up your first game through and understand everything. It definitely takes multiple playthroughs to pick up all the small things and learn all of the abilities and how everything works together. Once you have the hang of things, though, I think it's a pretty solid game. I rank it up there with games like Xayah, Firefly in my collection. I think it's a little bit below Xayah because of the new expansion to that. That's among my top 5 favorite games, I think. This one's pretty close, though. It's different in some ways, better in some. Like I said, the interplanetary missions, I think, are done much better in this game. The fact that all of these systems start in play, which is what makes the interplanetary missions work better, is also a downside because there's less exploration. You only have the outer limit tiles to explore. Being that the map is made of tiles, though, it does change every game, which is kind of cool. There is a lot of exploration in this, where you're exploring the knowledge cards down here, getting various things for doing that. You have this system upgrades to your ship, which are cool, so you can customize your ship to be however you want it to be. The limited numbers of them do make it a first-come, first-served market, which kind of is a cool feature, because you really want to be the first one to upgrade, but at the same time, you got to have the money to upgrade, you have to have the other things you need, so there's other things you have to do first, so it becomes a race in that aspect. The various commanders add a lot of replayability, as do the advanced rules. The solo AI is a really cool add-on for people who play solo or might have lower player counts. The game definitely plays better with more players because more is going on, and there's more to keep track of and figure out who's doing what. There is a co-op aspect, as you're all trying to keep the system alive and keep things rolling. But at the same time, I find it more of a versus game where you're trying to be the one to come out on top. Even in the co-op game, whoever ends up with the most Tau at the end is the new chancellor and the head of the Ceti Authority. So there's still a winner even in the co-op game, which is why I see it more as a non-competitive versus game, I guess is the best way to do it. There are a couple confusing things I wish were a little easier to understand. The way that the commodity tokens work in your cargo bay, how you keep track of that, does take some getting used to. I would have liked to see some more of the virus tokens because, as I said, especially if you're using the advanced rule that adds in the viruses, they're 4 tokens. It's not enough when you start spreading viruses around. Overall, it's a pretty interesting game. It does take a lot of learning to get everything used to. Your best bet is to go watch a how-to-play video if you can find one. I know there's a couple out there now. I may be doing one myself. I know I didn't really go through how the game plays in this, and that's because I plan on doing a how-to-play video of my own. It's just, right now I'm in a rush to get this out because I'm already so far behind, but I will be doing that eventually, and you'll get to see more of it in that respect. For now, I just wanted to show everything off, tell you what I thought of the final components. Everything's pretty solid. I like the improvements that have been in here. The upgrades to some of the cards made it a lot more clear, a lot easier to understand. Like I said, the only real complaint I had about the game was that the player boards and the Tau Ceti Exchange and Galactic Depot were slightly thinner material than I expected. They've held up pretty well so far, so I don't see it being a problem, but I still would have liked to see them be on some thicker board, like the tiles are made out of. Just a personal preference, though. It doesn't seem to affect anything, and it hasn't so far. Other than that, a little bit more variety in the secret objectives would have been cool. As it is, I think we only usually play with half the deck or so, because we take out a lot of those that are very similar. Just for our sake, just to make things a little more interesting. I like the way the game plays in waves, where every player gets four turns, basically 4 actions to do something, and then the turn counter goes up. So while you only may be playing a 10-turn game, technically every player gets 40 actions in those 10 turns, unless you're using the advanced role where you lose actions if crisis happens on your planet. But so it's really neat because you have a set amount of actions throughout the course of the entire game to achieve what you want to achieve. And there's various ways you can go about that through the interplanetary missions and things like that. Trading, exploration is a huge one. And crises do start piling up. And based on the crisis tokens that you draw, the various commodities will skyrocket. And especially if you're trying to achieve those objectives or whatever of having certain items, now they're going to cost more because of a crisis in play. And then you have that kill timer if their crisis gets on every planet. There's a lot going on in the game. Lots of things to look at. It certainly appeals to some players more than others. If it looks like something you'd be interested in, check out my how to play video when it comes out here. I'll put a link down below when it's ready. Otherwise, if you follow me, you'll get a post for it. But in the meantime, there's other ones out there. You can check out their videos and see if it's up your alley. Definitely check it out if it is something you're interested in. I know they're selling it on the Outer Limit Games website right now. And quantities were pretty limited, so I'm not sure if there's any left or how many there are. But definitely worth a look if you're into the 4X space theme games and looking for something a little different. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.